Hi, welcome to Echoes from the Satellite. I'm your host, Karen. And on this episode, we're going back to doing some more comics. Yes, we're going to go back and look once again at Killraven in Amazing Adventures, War of the Worlds. A while back, we looked at the first issue in this series, and now we're going to go back and look at, I think, the first four issues after that initial issue. So let's talk a little bit about what happens in those initial issues. Um, this was another one of those series from Marvel where they didn't really get the creative team established for a while going in. So you had different writers, different artists. Um, Initially, Jerry Conway was writing it, and we had some different artists. Howard Chaykin, just in the first few issues here, which I'm going to go over, we'll see. I think three different. No, I take that back. Two different artists, but we'll have three different writers. So I think it's very hard for a book to find its footing when the creative team is changing frequently. Now, Don McGregor, who goes on to become essentially the writer of record, does show up in issue 21. So we're going to start with issue 19. So he shows up in 21, and I think that does give it some stability, but he still doesn't get his partner in crime, P. Craig Russell, until I think it's issue 27. So there's still some instability going on there for quite a while with the book, with different artists and different looks. And I have to say that really it's Craig Russell's art, I think, that most people think of when they think about. I mean, it is. Don't get me wrong. McGregor's writing is integral to the series, but that Craig Russell art, there just was nothing like it at the time. He has a very almost ethereal style, which again, it was the two of those things coming together. McGregor's writing and story sense, and then the Russell's art, which really made Killraven so special. But yeah, starting out here, pretty bumpy ride with different writers and artists. Now, before we dive into looking at the book, because Jerry Conway is the first writer we're going to see, and since Jerry Conway just passed away recently, I did want to say a few things about um, Mr. Conway. I had the good fortune of speaking with him a few times back in the day when I was writing articles for Back Issue magazine. And I have to say, um, he he was definitely my favorite person to interview, my favorite comics pro to interview. Um, Jerry Conway was he was down to earth, and he had a way of putting you at ease, which was great because I always felt kind of nervous interviewing these people that I had been, reading their work when I was a kid. So that was great. He was very friendly, and he was also very funny. He had a great sense of humor and just very candid. So that was also really appreciated. He just said what he thought about things and was able to, tell a lot of great stories about his work and his experiences. And this is a guy who I believe started working at Marvel when he was only 18 years old. So he comes into Marvel as a very young man, still in his teens, and in no time at all is being asked to do things like take over Spider-Man, take over Thor from Stan Lee. Stan Lee goes off the book, and then Jerry's writing Thor. We're taking over Fantastic Four. So he was such a like a go-to guy. When Roy had something that he couldn't write, like in the case of Killraven, because he was too busy, It's like, who will I get? Oh, I'll get Jerry. I think the same thing happened with like Werewolf by Night, and I think he may have written the first issue of Tomb of Dracula. So it was always sort of like, well, who's the best person I can get to write this book? And it would go to Jerry Conway. So Jerry wrote a lot of different series. And then because I'm such a Marvelite, I focus on all the Marvel stuff. But then he also went over to DC and did a lot of work. And then, of course, he left comics and he wrote for TV. So just a guy who seemed to have like a great career and was definitely a joy to talk to. So um, it's always hard to see these people who have this um, meaning in our lives disappear. You know, even if we don't know them personally, they've given us such joy in our lives. So very sorry to see that he had passed recently, and of course, you know, just condolences to his loved ones. So yeah, let's go ahead. Let's jump into issue 19, and we'll see what's happening with Killraven and his band of freemen. All right, so here we are with issue 19, and this is the Sirens of 7th Avenue. And so the team we've got here is Jerry Conway, Howard Chaykin, and Frank McLaughlin on inks. Uh, you know, Killraven has fought his way through keepers and mutates only to find he's confronted by these sirens. And so these are women that the Martians have mutated to have these hypnotic powers, but hypnotic powers don't work on Killraven. And so he's trying to you know, make his way free through the sirens and then a bunch of mutants, not X-Men, but mutated humans that the Martians have under their control. He makes his way and starts busting his way out to try to get to his band of free men, including his pal Mashula, and we're introduced to Hawk. Now, Hawk here, you can see in this page, Hawk is will look very different in a few issues. So this issue, we're introduced to Hawk looking a little bit like the Banshee from X-Men, but just wait a few issues and you'll see he's going to change his appearance quite a bit. So they continue their fight to get free of the Martians and their slaves. They fight through this Martian tripod, and then they come past a mutated crocodile. They see a bunch of slaves. Uh, you know, it's one big, long running fight pretty much through this issue. You get a lot of interesting apocalyptic imagery, like the Statue of Liberty over here. Um, they get on this, it looks like a ferry boat. Then they have another tripod attack. Um, Eventually we get a cutaway to a scientist, and you know the scientists are all evil sellouts in Killraven, working with a Martian. So you can see the Martian looks a bit like I don't know, like a big slug with a lot of tentacles. So pretty unpleasant looking characters. So the Martians, you know, are desperate to get their hands on Killraven. They send out another siren, and she's able to entrance Killraven's men, but not Killraven. He then gets captured in this funky looking tripod thing, brings him into an arena in front of a Martian master, where he faces off against this another mutated creature. There's a lot of mutants in this series. It's just not the mutants we're used to. But of course, Killraven prevails and manages to break free of his bonds. actually takes down, I don't know how, I guess sheer force of will, fighting capability, whatever, takes down this giant dude, um, frees his men, and has he's learned so much. He actually understands what's going on now, that there was an alien invasion, and he's saying, well, we're going to take the fight to them eventually. We're going to give them a struggle and blah blah blah, right? So they prevail at the end of this book. But in the next issue, we've got issue 20, which opens on Killraven and Mashola in a gun battle. So they've, there's zap pistols here. Now this one, we've got completely different credits in this issue. So we've got a completely different writer, Marv Wolfman, different artist, Herb Trimpe, who, his claim to fame was primarily off of Incredible Hulk, and then the inker is Frank Giacoia. So uh, in this issue, we've got a whole new team on the book. So anyway, The Warlord Strikes is the title of this one. And Killraven and Mashola are, blasting their way through a bunch of uh, human slaves. So they're basically fighting for the Martians. They're trying to get into this building. It's a museum, and they're doing all sorts of you know using guns, swords, whatever. Um, Finally, they make their way through, and you can see. I mean, this is very Herb Trimpe art. It's. I don't know that I think Giacoia is the best inker for him. I've seen a lot better inkers. I always thought the Severins were good inkers for Trimpe. Um, but anyway, it is what it is. So once they get rid of all these antagonists, they start, looking through the museum to see if there's anything interesting that they could use there. And thankfully, Killraven finds some armor and clothing that he can use, and we get him in the outfit that will become accustomed to him in for the rest of the series. Um, and his little tiny scale mail. It's certainly not a shirt. It's not even a halter top. I'm not sure what it is, but he's got that, and thankfully some pants on. Um, so anyway, that's one big uh, turn for the better. And they find some swords and some other goodies that they can use. So they run off with that. Somehow they get this army truck to start. Not really sure how the battery and everything's still running, but sure, why not? Um, and they have a goal of getting to um, this mysterious place, LaGuardia, where they think they will be able to find some more weapons. Once again, they're fighting tripods. That seems to happen every issue so far. Um, and then we cut away to this guy called the Warlord. Um, a pretty funky looking guy, nice crew cut. Um, he's working with the Martians, and he's pretty upset with Killraven. Apparently, he blames Killraven for losing his arm and for having his face messed up, and so he's out for blood. He wants to get Killraven, and so he's telling the Martians that he's gonna bring them there, and he wants to get Killraven and his men. So they're setting up a trap for him. And so there they are at the airport. Now, I'm pretty sure this is Old Skull, but they don't call him Old Skull yet. But that's going to be a character, a supporting character that will continue in the series for as long as it goes on. And anyway, they bust in. He gets to use one of his throwing stars. This was, back in the 70s with all the martial arts movies, um, seeing throwing stars, ninja stars, that was a big deal back then. But anyway, they break into the airport and they see all these wonderful like laser guns and things, and they're like, "Oh, great, we can take them." Um, but Killraven's starting to feel like, oh, this is probably a setup. And of course, he's right. This is such a typical Herb Trimpe punch. This could have very easily have been the Hulk punching somebody, and the little exclamation, the sound effect of "foom." Of course, this was like 73, 74. Foom magazine was out, the fan magazine. So that's a little in joke, but oh my God, that's a total Herb Trimpe punch. So very cool to see here. Um, so yeah, then the Killraven and the Warlord go at it. He's super strong, so he's throwing huge, um, obscure equipment around, and eventually he subdues Killraven at the end of this issue. So it's a cliffhanger. We have to see what will happen in the next issue. So, number 21. Now, interestingly enough, on this cover, and even in the little insignia up here, um, we've got the uncovered leg look here. So either somebody didn't get the memo or somebody just thought that looked really hot. But yeah, kind of doing half and half outfit for Killraven here. Um, Pretty interesting cover. You got like this bizarre, I don't know, lobster insect dude, weird ape kind of guy. This is the kind of thing I didn't have this issue as a kid, but if I'd seen it on the stands, I surely would have bought it. So there you go. They knew how to appeal to the youth. This issue is the Mutant Slayers. Now, the creative team changes once again. We still have Herb Trimpe as penciler, but Don McGregor has now come on as writer, and we will see a lot of a lot more text in the comic, and the story you'll start to see some threads carry over. So we'll start to see a little more consistency, I think, as we move forward. This is very interesting. This inker, Yolanda, I have no idea how to pronounce that last name. Pique? I don't know. I looked this person up. All I could find on the internet was that this was a woman inker, and this may have been the only Marvel comic she inked. I would love to know more. So if anybody has some insights about this person, um, please share them in the comments. All in all, I didn't think it was a bad inking job. Maybe a little heavy, but um, as inkers go, I didn't think it was too bad. So this issue is interesting. There's a few new characters introduced. Um, like I said, this is Don McGregor, so you can start to see some plot threads being laid down here. But he's got to finish up the story that Marv Wolfman started. So we've got Killraven trying to break free of the warlord's grip. Now, when we left the previous issue, I mean, it looked like he was out cold. Now he's running around tossing people around. So anyway, something happened there. Not quite sure what. Um, we're introduced to Carmilla Frost here, and this is a character that will continue throughout the series. She is a scientist, molecular biologist, and so since there's so much going on with genetics and cloning and so forth in the series, she has an important role to play, and we'll see that as things evolve. It may seem like I've kind of gone through these other issues quickly, and I have because um, they they just feel almost irrelevant until we start getting more into the McGregor um, Russell issues. So once again, we've got Killraven and his guys being hassled by the Martians' henchmen, and the warlord's got his folks, and Carmilla has um, her people here who I think we can pretty much infer are um, some sort of mutates who are having him and trying to stop him. And There's some bizarre stuff going on here as he's about to punch this guy. The guy is like, wait. He's like, wait, nothing. So what the heck was the thought there? I don't know. It's kind of funny. So he's trying to get to his people. And there's a great deal of frustration by this warlord, but he eventually gets down on the floor there with Killraven, and we don't really see the actual blows. We just sort of see the like sound effects, but he pretty much just beans Killraven over and over again with that big metal fist. So that lays him out. Even though they have him, strapped down on this table, he still manages to kick the guy in the face. So Killraven is um, sort of indomitable. And we can see that there's a conflict between Carmilla, and we can see that Carmilla Frost and the Warlord are not getting along, and that the Warlord just wants to kill Killraven, but Carmilla says that, there's better things we can do with Killraven than, have him used as a guinea pig or kill him. Meanwhile, Mashola and the other freemen are trying to break out of what kind of looks like a dungeon. And this is when we get Old Skull, actually called Old Skull here. And this is actually Hawk back here. Remember I said he would start to look different? You'll see him again and see kind of how he's changed. So those guys are trying to break out. Meanwhile, Carmilla makes her way into the cloning division. Thank God for, labeled doors. And she goes to get someone called Grok. And so she opens the door, and out pops this bizarre looking guy who is actually, if we look at the cover, I'm pretty sure that's Grok. So Grok looks a lot like an ape, but he also has these weird suction cups on his hands. So obviously he's been experimented upon, and he seems to be loyal to Carmilla. So anyway, she gets him to come out and follow her. They disable some guards, and then they free uh, Killraven's group. And so then, they proceed to head towards wherever Killraven's being kept, while at the same time, the warlord is, planning to do some terrible, nasty things to Killraven, but stupidly frees one of his hands. Killraven starts choking him, and we can see the colorist, for whatever reason, gave him the bare leg look there. I don't know what that obsession is with the bare legs. Um, but even though Killraven is trying to choke the warlord, again, that humongous metal fist comes down and pummels him. He's got to have a traumatic brain injury at this point. I don't know how he could stand being hit over and over again by that huge metal fist. So anyway, um, he's he's probably out like a light, and he's about ready to start doing some hideous experiments, but then Killraven's men burst in, and they go to like free him. Carmilla's going to help them out. Um, all hell is breaking loose, and she's brought his weapons, and it's sort of like, what the heck is going on? But the warlord is still after them, and Killraven's like, well, if you know a way out of here, you better help us find a way out. And of course, she leads them out. And ironically, where have they been? Yankee Stadium. We see it's sort of been excavated out, but you can see the bleachers and everything. The seats are still there. So, yeah, the Martians even desecrated Yankee Stadium. Can you believe it? Terrible. So as they try to escape, they find that there's this. The only way out is over this like thin bridge that goes across that great chasm. And of course, as Killraven starts crossing that bridge, what happens? But this unbelievably weird creature comes out like a giant crab. It's like something. It's like that giant crab in the Ray Harryhausen movie. What is it? Mysterious Island. Remember Mysterious Island? Only it has a human face, and he's shooting out like this corrosive acid stuff. So it's like a triple threat. Anyway, they're trying to fight their way across. A hawk gets hit in the face with the acid. So Hawk has now gone from looking like the banshee to being a Native American. Um, why? I don't know. We'd probably have to do an interview with Don McGregor or somebody. Um, in any case, they're fighting this thing and trying to avoid the acid, and then all these other bizarre, combo creatures start popping out. And I'm with Old Skull. Old Skull don't believe this. He really don't. I don't believe it either. Um, then we get, the warlord. He's just really getting off on this. He's pretty sure that Killraven's going to get killed. Um, they're doing their best, but having a hard time. Carmilla sends her pal Grok to go help Killraven. They manage to throw the crab creature over the divide. The warlord is just so upset about this. He jumps into the fray to try to stop Killraven. And then Killraven knocks his arm into some of the acid that the crab creature spit out and disintegrates his arm. So he's just completely freaked out by this. Pretty much useless at that point. And so then the Killraven's like, okay, guys, let's go. We've defeated them. And so that's the end of that issue. So let's look at issue 22. So issue 22, we have this groovy cover here with this red-skinned guy. He's got some fancy earrings on, and he's got, instead of arms, he has these long tentacles with the suckers on them. And then Killraven once again going bare-legged. I don't know. Somebody didn't get the memo. And then we've got a bunch of these Martian masters down in the pit just waiting to get their tentacles on Killraven. Now, this issue, 22, Washington Nightmare, almost the same team as before. We've got Don McGregor writing again, Herb Trimpe drawing again, but this time Frank Chiaramonte on inks. And so we're leaving the scene. So they've obviously they've left Yankee Stadium. It looks like they're they're in Washington. So we can assume that a bit of travel has occurred. They're going down the Potomac. Oh, but what happens? Of course, this is Killraven. I don't think he's ever safe in any vehicle. They're going down the Potomac in this boat, and this gigantic Martian creature pops out of the water and upends the boat. So, yeah, that's pretty gross looking thing. Tentacles, kind of spidery legs, this weird central body with the funky eyes, and yeah, it's nasty. It's really a freakish looking thing. On the next page, so we see that Mashola and Killraven are both in the tentacles of that creature. And then over on the shoreline, we have a character, and it says Saber. It says, yes, I see them. Abraxas should be pleased, blah, blah, blah. Now, this is really interesting. I'm going to cut away for a second. The fact that this character is named Saber, because uh, Don McGregor and Paul Gulacy created a character named Saber a few years later. So this was around 73, 74. In 1978, they had a comic book called Saber, and it was set in a post-apocalyptic time. And the hero was named Saber, and he looked sort of like Jimi Hendrix. I got the picture up here. And Saber was that the book was one of the first, if not the first, um, independent books that was exclusively sold through the direct market, and it was published by Eclipse. Now, I don't have any issues of Saber. I remember, I think saw a few. There was a time where I worked in a comic book store. I think I saw a few, but I don't actually have any of my own. But it's interesting that McGregor clearly had the idea for the name, and there are some similarities between the Saber that he published and at least the look of this character with this guy. He has a cutlass, he is black. So it's kind of funny to see that, and you'll see creators carry character ideas around for a while and change them around. So thought that was kind of interesting. But anyway, the Saber in this book is sort of a freebooter. He's obviously he's not working directly for the Martians, like he's not enslaved by them, but he's going out and he's collecting other humans to be enslaved. So not a nice guy. Um, as he watches to see, which humans escape so that they can grab them and haul them off to, sell them off. Both Killraven and Mashola are still fighting this, bizarro Martian monster. And then Carmilla Frost and Grok are still with them. And apparently Grok is too much for Saber and his people. So they decide to take whoever they've captured and run off and leave Carmilla and Grok alone. And Mashola manages to get his crossbow free and get a few good shots in. Killraven stabs it, and so the creature either perishes or withdraws. They figure out that they need to, once again, they need to rescue their people. But they have a little argument with Carmilla before that. They decide to regroup and camp out at the Washington Monument. There's this discussion between Carmilla and Mashola about sort of what it's like for them living the way they do, and that people have become hard. And then all of a sudden, it's like they sort of get ambushed, but Killraven thinks he's got the drop on their ambusher, this strange green woman, but she's a little tougher than he thinks. And she pulls a gun on them. Eventually, they all kind of, make a truce. And it turns out, so this character, they've introduced another new character. You can see she says that she is looking for her group of people, which she thinks have been taken away by those slavers. And she says, I'll tell you my name once and you'd better remember it. It's Mint Julep. And Killraven says, you gotta be kidding. Which is funny. I don't know, would they even know what a mint julep is? But I thought that was funny. So anyway, they decide they're going to sneak over to the Lincoln Memorial because this is where they figured out their people are being held. And so they're creeping in there at night. I thought this was kind of effective. It's, you think about how hard it must be to draw somebody creeping around at night. And they did a good job. And then they find, as they go inside, that this freaky dude, the guy we saw on the cover, whose name is Abraxas, and there was an album by Santana that had that name. Um, I'm showing my age, but anyway, um, so he's basically auctioning off, the gang, Old Skull, and the rest of them, uh, to all these freaky Martian dudes who are just hanging out around here. And of course, Killraven's having none of it. So they're all busting in and trying to free their people. And then Mint Julep. I mean, we don't really get much of an explanation. Like, who is she? Why is she green? Assuming once again that it's part of this whole mutation and genetic experimentation that was going on in the book. And I was trying to remember, do we see her again later on? And I'm not so sure. So anyway, we'll discover it together. But she's freeing up her women, her band of women, and so they're all starting to fight. But then Saber shows up again, and he picks on Killraven because he wants an opponent, a worthy opponent. So they're clashing right in front of the statue of Lincoln, taking having a fight, but in typical Don McGregor fashion, they're having a full-fledged conversation as they do their sword fight. And unfortunately for Saber, Abraxas decides to whip his tentacles around Killraven and pull him away and, offer him up to the Martians, basically toss him over to the Martians. So we're going to stop here and then we'll pick up with next issue with a little more mint julep and some rats. Bigger than Ben and wilder than Willard. And if you're watching this channel, you probably know what that's in reference to. So we'll stop our reading here. So I think one of the things we've seen in these first few issues is a lot of repetitiveness. Um, I think they're still trying to figure out what they're doing. And of course, it didn't help that, you had 3 different writers in those first few issues. I will say that what I'm more familiar with is the later part of the series, and I found that a lot more imaginative. So as we work our ways into those later issues, I think you'll see why a lot of people felt this was a really exceptional series from Marvel. Right now, it feels like a bit of a slog, but I think also now that we've got Don McGregor on the book, he's starting to lay down some things that will, play out later on. So we're just starting to get into the good stuff. So hang in there if it felt like, oh, they're going from point A to B and they're getting captured and they're having to rescue their people and they have to fight the Martian. It's like, yeah, it's kind of the same plot over and over the first few issues, but it will get better, and especially when we get into uh, we bring in Craig Russell on the art, uh, it's going to really kick it up a lot. So anyway, thanks for joining me on this. I'd love to hear your comments about the book and when you first experienced it, or if this is your first encounter with Killraven, let me know. There's been some other things done with Killraven. I know one of the things I do want to go back and look at is there was a series. Hold on a second, I'm trying to think of it. It was It was Avengers Forever. Um, oh gosh, and I don't remember exactly. This is what happens when you're not totally prepared. You're doing things off the top of your head, but no, Avengers Forever, which was like a 12-part series, and I know that Killraven shows up in part of that, and I thought that it was an interesting way to use him because they just had a lot of different characters from different potential timelines. Um, so anyway, I'm gonna have to pull that out of the closet and see what that looks like. But for now, try to focus on just the main Killraven book. I also noticed in that collection I've got, they have the issue where Killraven teams up with Spider-Man and Marvel team up. So usually those kinds of things aren't so great, but we'll take a look at that when we come to it as well. So anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. I hope you're reading great stuff and taking care of yourself. And thanks for stopping by. I'll see you again real soon.